The badge was fake, but the gun was real. And so was the hate in his eyes. Malik Jackson didn't flinch as the barrel of the 9mm hovered inches from his chest. The man in front of him, decked out in a cheap polyester uniform with HOA security, stitched crookedly on the chest, was shaking not from fear, but from rage. His name tag read Officer Brandt. But Malik, a Delta Force operative with 12 years of reading liars, knew the guy was no cop. The sweat beading on Brandt's forehead, the twitch in his trigger finger, the way his voice cracked when he barked, "Hands up, boy!" It all screamed amateur. And something darker. Malik stood still, his breath steady, his hands loose at his sides. He was 6 feet 2 inches, broad-shouldered, with scars from Kabul to Mogadishu etched into his skin like a roadmap of survival. His dark eyes locked onto Brandt's, unyielding, calculating. Under his jacket, a concealed Glock 19 rested against his hip, loaded and ready. But Malik wasn't here to draw first. Not yet. "Who you calling boy?" Malik's voice was low, deliberate, cutting through the humid Atlanta evening like a blade. The alley behind the gated community was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the faint rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. Brandt's face flushed redder, his grip tightening on the pistol. "You don't belong here," Brandt spat, stepping closer. "This is a private neighborhood. We don't take kindly to your kind sneaking around." Malik's jaw tightened. He'd heard it all before, different voices, same venom. Growing up in rural Georgia, he'd been chased by dogs, called names, had bottles thrown at him from passing trucks. He'd clawed his way out of that hate, through the Army, through Delta Force, through missions where one wrong move meant death. And now, at 34, standing in an alley 20 miles from his childhood home, he was staring down the same old monster. A man with a gun and a grudge, hiding behind a badge that didn't exist. He'd come to this upscale neighborhood to visit his sister, Aisha, who just moved into a townhouse with her husband and 2 kids. A rare day off, a chance to grill burgers and laugh over old stories. But as he'd walked from his truck to her address, Brandt had rolled up in an unmarked SUV, lights flashing, demanding ID. Malik had complied, calm but firm, handing over his driver's license. That's when Brandt's eyes had narrowed, his tone shifting from suspicion to something uglier. "You think you can just walk in here?" Brandt's voice rose, his fake badge glinting under the streetlight. "I know your type. Thugs. Always looking for trouble." Malik tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "My type?" he echoed, letting the words hang. He could feel the weight of the Glock, the familiar heft of his training kicking in asses, de-escalate, neutralize if necessary. But this wasn't a battlefield in Fallujah. This was home, or at least it was supposed to be. And that made it worse. Brandt took another step, the gun now inches from Malik's sternum. "Get on the ground. Now." His voice was a snarl, but there was a tremor in it, a crack in the facade. Malik's eyes flicked to the man's belt-no radio, no cuffs, just a cheap holster and a flashlight that looked like it came from a gas station. This wasn't just a fake cop. This was a man playing a role drunk on power he didn't have. Malik's mind raced. He could disarm Brandt in 3 moves. Sidestep, grab the wrist, twist until the gun dropped. He'd done it 100 times in training, a dozen more in combat. But he also knew the optics: black man, armed, taking down a white guy with a badge, real or not. The headlines would bury him before the truth came out. And Aisha's kids didn't need to see their uncle on the news, painted as a villain. "Put the gun down," Malik said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You don't know what you're starting." Brandt laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm starting. You think you're tough? I'll show you tough." He jabbed the gun forward, the barrel grazing Malik's jacket. That was the mistake. Malik moved like lightning. His left hand shot up, deflecting Brandt's wrist just as his right hand drew the Glock from its holster. In one fluid motion, he had Brandt's arm pinned, the fake cop's gun clattering to the asphalt. Malik's own pistol was now pressed against Brandt's temple. His grip steady, his breathing even. "Don't move." Malik's voice was a low growl, each word deliberate. Brandt froze, his bravado crumbling as his eyes widened in panic. For the first time, he seemed to realize the man he'd targeted wasn't just a bystander. Malik leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "You picked the wrong guy." Brandt's knees buckled, but Malik held him upright, the Glock still firm against his head. "Who sent you?" Malik demanded. "HOA doesn't have armed security. That badge is fake. Start talking." Brandt's mouth opened, but no words came. His face was a mask of fear and fury, the kind of look Malik had seen on men who knew they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Before Brandt could answer, a shout broke the silence. "Malik!" Aisha's voice cut through the tension like a siren. She stood at the end of the alley, her phone in one hand, her other arm shielding her son, Jamal, who peeked out from behind her. "What's going on? Are you okay?" Malik didn't take his eyes off Brandt. "Stay back, Aisha. Call the real cops." She hesitated, her face a mix of fear and resolve, then nodded and started dialing. Jamal's wide eyes locked onto his uncle, a mix of awe and terror in his gaze. Malik hated that look. No kid should see this. No kid should have to. Brandt squirmed, his voice rising in a desperate pitch. "You're making a mistake. I'm just doing my job." "Your job?" Malik's grip tightened. "Your job is to terrorize people? To pull a gun on someone for walking to his sister's house? You're not a cop. You're a coward with a costume." The words hit Brandt like a slap, his face twisting with shame and defiance. Malik could feel the man's pulse racing under his grip, the adrenaline of the moment threatening to spiral out of control. He forced himself to stay calm, to keep the situation contained. He'd seen what happened when tempers flared, when fear and hate collided. He'd buried teammates because of it. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Malik's eyes flicked toward the sound, then back to Brandt. "You're done," he said quietly. "Whatever this was, it ends now." But it wasn't over. Not yet. As the police cars screeched into the alley, their lights painting the walls red and blue, Malik lowered his gun but kept Brandt pinned. Two officers leapt out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Malik raised one hand slowly, the other still holding Brandt's arm. "I'm armed, licensed, and in control," he called out, his voice steady. "This man pulled a gun on me. He's impersonating an officer." The officers hesitated, their eyes darting between Malik and Brandt. One of them, a young woman with sharp features, stepped forward, her hand on her holster. "Drop the weapon and step back," she ordered. Malik complied, setting his Glock on the ground and stepping away from Brandt, who collapsed to his knees, babbling about self-defense and trespassers. Aisha ran forward, her phone still in hand, recording everything. "He's my brother," she shouted. "He's Delta Force. That man attacked him." The second officer, an older man with graying hair, lowered his weapon slightly, his eyes narrowing as he took in Brandt's cheap uniform and the fake badge now lying in the dirt. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, cuffing Brandt's hands behind his back. Malik stood tall, his heart pounding but his face calm. He knew how this could go, how it too often went. A black man with a gun, a white man claiming victimhood. The truth didn't always win in moments like these. But as he looked at Aisha, at Jamal's small face peering from behind her. He knew he couldn't let this moment define them. Not like this. The older officer approached Malik, his expression unreadable. "Your Delta Force?" he asked, glancing at Malik's ID, now on the ground where Brandt had thrown it. Malik nodded. 12 years. Just visiting my family." The officer studied him for a long moment, then handed back the ID. "You're lucky you didn't pull that trigger," he said quietly. "This could have gone real bad." Malik met his gaze. "I know. That's why I didn't." As Brandt was hauled into the back of a squad car, still shouting about his rights, Aisha rushed to Malik, throwing her arms around him. "You scared me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm fine," Malik said. But his eyes were on Jamal, who was clutching his mother's leg. He knelt down, forcing a smile. "Hey, little man. You okay?" Jamal nodded, but his eyes were still wide, his small hands trembling. Malik's heart twisted. This wasn't just about him or Brandt or the gun. This was about a kid who'd just seen his uncle held at gunpoint for no reason other than the color of his skin. It was about a world that kept forcing that lesson on kids too young to understand it. The female officer approached, her expression softer now. "We'll need your statement," she said. "And we're running this guy's ID. If he's not legit, he's in deep." "He's not," Malik said flatly. "Check the badge. Check the gun. Check his story." She nodded, jotting something in her notebook. "You handled this better than most would've." Malik didn't respond. He didn't need praise for surviving. He needed change. As the officers took Brandt away, Malik guided Aisha and Jamal back toward the townhouse. The neighbors had started to gather, whispering behind their manicured hedges, their phones out, filming. Malik ignored them. He'd seen worse than curious stares. But he couldn't ignore the weight in his chest, the realization that no matter how far he'd come, how many missions he'd survived, this fight was still waiting for him at home. Inside the townhouse, Aisha's husband, Marcus, was pacing, his face etched with worry. "What the hell happened out there?" he demanded, pulling Jamal into a hug. Malik sat heavily on the couch, his Glock now back in its holster. "Some guy playing vigilante," he said. "Thought he could scare me out of the neighborhood." Aisha's eyes flashed with anger. "This is our home. We pay the same HOA fees as everyone else. Why is this still happening?" Malik didn't have an answer. He wanted to tell her it would get better, that the world was changing, that her kids wouldn't have to grow up dodging the same hate he had. But the words felt hollow. He'd seen too much, lived through too much to believe in easy promises. Instead, he reached for Jamal, ruffling his hair. "You're gonna be okay, kid," he said softly. "We're all gonna be okay." But as he said it, his mind was already replaying the alley, the gun, the look in Brandt's eyes. And he knew this wasn't the end. Not for him, not for Aisha, not for any of them. The next morning, Malik woke to a flood of notifications on his phone. Aisha's video had gone viral, spreading across X and every news outlet in the city. The headlines screamed, "Fake cop pulls gun on black veteran." Brandt's real name was revealed: Kevin Brantley, a failed security guard with a rap sheet for assault and a history of racist posts online. The HOA issued a frantic statement, denying any connection to him. The police confirmed his badge was fake, his gun unregistered. But the story wasn't just about Brantley. It was about Malik, about Aisha, about the neighbors who'd stood by and watched. It was about a system that let men like Brantley feel untouchable, and about the people who fought back anyway. Malik didn't want the attention. He didn't want to be a headline or a hero. He just wanted to take his nephew to the park without looking over his shoulder. But as he scrolled through the comments, some supportive, some vicious, realized something else. This moment, this fight wasn't just his. It was bigger. He set the phone down and looked out the window at the quiet street, the manicured lawns, the illusion of safety. And he made a decision. He wasn't going to let Brantley's kind win. Not here, not anywhere. Malik spent the next few days dodging reporters camped outside Aisha's townhouse. The viral video had turned him into a reluctant symbol, a lightning rod for every opinion on race, guns, and justice in America. Some called him a hero, a black veteran who'd stood his ground. Others branded him a thug, spinning lies about how he'd provoked Brantley. The truth, as always, was Messier, and Malik wanted no part of the circus. But the world had other plans. Aisha's living room became a war room. Marcus printed out emails from lawyers offering to represent Malik pro bono. Aisha fielded calls from community organizers begging him to speak at rallies. Jamal, still shaken, drew pictures of his uncle as a superhero, cape and all. Malik forced a smile each time the boy showed him one, but inside, he was wrestling with a question. What now? He could walk away, let the courts handle Brantley and go back to his life. Or he could fight not just for himself, but for every kid like Jamal who deserved better. On the third day, a knock at the door broke the tension. It was Detective Carla Reyes, the female officer from the alley. She stood on the porch, her badge clipped to her belt, her expression guarded but not hostile. "Can we talk?" she asked. Malik nodded, stepping outside. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and impending rain. Reyes leaned against the porch railing, her eyes scanning the street. "Brantley's talking," she said. "Claims he was hired by someone in the HOA to keep an eye on new residents. Says he was told to scare off anyone who didn't fit the neighborhood's profile." Malik's fists clenched. "Profile? You mean black?" Reyes didn't flinch. "That's what we're digging into. The HOA's board is lawyering up, denying everything. But we found texts on Brantley's phone orders to target specific addresses, including your sister's. Someone wanted her family gone." Malik's blood ran cold. Aisha had worked years to afford this place, scraping together a down payment while raising 2 kids. The thought of someone plotting to drive her out, not for anything she'd done but for who she was, lit a fire in him. "Who's behind it?" he asked, his voice low. "We don't know yet," Reyes admitted. "But Brantley's not smart enough to pull this off alone. He's a pawn. We're looking at the HOA president, a guy named Warren Holt. Big money, old family, doesn't like change." "Sound familiar?" Malik nodded. He'd met men like Holt before, small kings of small kingdoms, wielding power like a club. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Reyes studied him. "Your statement's solid, but if you're willing, we could use you to draw Holt out. He's slippery, but he's got a temper. If we can get him to slip up, we might nail him." Malik hesitated. Going undercover wasn't new to him. Delta Force had sent him into hellholes to extract intel from worse than Holt. But this was personal. This was Aisha's home, Jamal's future. If he did this, there'd be no going back to a quiet life. "What's the play?" he asked. Reyes outlined the plan. Malik would attend the next HOA meeting, posing as a concerned resident. The police would wire him, record everything. Holt, known for his outbursts, might reveal something incriminating if pushed. It was risky. Holt's connections ran deep, and Brantley's arrest had already spooked him. But Malik saw no other way. He couldn't let this rot fester in his sister's neighborhood. "All right," he said. "I'm in." The HOA meeting was held in a community center that smelled of bleach and bad coffee. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, filled with residents in khakis and cardigans, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Malik sat near the back, his wire hidden under a plain black hoodie. Aisha had wanted to come, but he'd convinced her to stay home. If things went south, he didn't want her in the crossfire. Warren Holt stood at the podium, a man in his late 50s with a golfer's tan and a politician's smile. His tailored suit screamed money, but his eyes cold, calculating gave him away. He was the kind of man who'd smile while stabbing you in the back. "We're here to address recent misunderstandings," Holt began, his voice smooth. "Our community values safety, and we regret any distress caused by Mr. Brantley's actions." Malik's jaw tightened. Misunderstandings didn't pull guns on people. He waited, letting Holt dig his hole. The man droned on about property values and standards, each word laced with a coded message. Keep this place white, wealthy, and walled off. The crowd nodded along, some eagerly, others uncomfortably. When Holt opened the floor for questions, Malik stood. Every eye in the room turned to him. He felt the weight of their stares, some hostile, some curious, a few ashamed. "Malik Jackson," he said, his voice steady. "My sister lives here. 3 days ago, your so-called security pulled a gun on me for walking to her house. You call that a misunderstanding?" The room went silent. Holt's smile faltered, just for a second. "Mr. Jackson, we've apologized for Mr. Brantley's actions. He was not employed by us." "Really?" Malik stepped forward, his presence commanding the space. "Then why was he targeting black families? Why was my sister's address on his list?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Holt's face reddened, his hands gripping the podium. "That's a serious accusation," he said, his voice tight. "You have no proof." Malik held his gaze. "Brantley's talking to the police. He says you hired him, gave him orders to scare us out." The lie was calculated. Reyes had coached him to push Holt's buttons. And it worked. Holt's composure cracked, his voice rising. "That's absurd. You people come here, stirring up trouble, and now you're blaming me? This is our community." The words landed like a grenade. "You people." The crowd shifted, some gasping, others nodding in quiet agreement. Malik didn't flinch. "Our community?" he shot back. "My sister pays her dues. Her kids play in the same park as yours. What makes you think you own this place?" Holt's eyes blazed. "You don't belong here," he snapped before catching himself. But it was too late. The wire had caught every word. Reyes, listening from an unmarked van outside, gave the signal. Seconds later, officers entered the room, their badges real, their authority undeniable. "Warren Holt," Reyes said, stepping forward. "You're under arrest for conspiracy and incitement." The crowd erupted, shouts, gasps, a few cheers. Holt sputtered, his face a mask of outrage as he was cuffed. "This is a mistake," he bellowed. "You can't do this." Malik watched, his expression unreadable. He'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. As Holt was led away, a woman in the crowd stood, a white woman in her 40s, her face flushed with anger. "This is wrong," she shouted. "He was protecting us." "Protecting you from what?" Malik asked, his voice cutting through the noise. "From my nephew riding his bike? From my sister planting flowers? Tell me." The woman faltered, her mouth opening and closing. Others looked away, their silence louder than any protest. Malik turned and walked out, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He'd exposed Holt, but the rot ran deeper than one man. Back at Aisha's, the family gathered around the kitchen table. Marcus poured coffee, his hands shaking slightly. "You think this changes anything?" he asked. Malik looked at Jamal, who was coloring a new superhero picture, this time with Aisha and Marcus by his side. "It's a start," he said, "but it's on us to keep pushing. All of us." Aisha reached for his hand. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. You could have walked away. No, Malik said. I couldn't. Not when it's you. Not when it's him. He nodded at Jamal, who grinned up at him. The weeks that followed were a blur. Holt's arrest made national news, sparking protests and counter-protests. The HOA was dissolved, its board investigated for fraud and discrimination. Malik testified in court, his voice steady as he recounted the alley, the gun, the hate. Brantley took a plea deal, naming Holt as the mastermind. The evidence texts, emails, bank transfers was overwhelming. Holt was convicted, sentenced to 7 years. But the real change happened quietly. Aisha started a neighborhood watch, not with guns but with open doors. Neighbors who'd stayed silent began showing up, some apologizing, others joining her meetings. Jamal's school held a unity day, where kids shared stories of their families. It wasn't perfect. Some residents moved out, unwilling to face the truth. But others stayed, and slowly the community began to heal. Malik returned to his work with Delta Force, but he carried Atlanta with him. On his last day in town, he took Jamal to the park. The boy ran ahead, laughing, while Malik watched from a bench. An older black man approached, his face lined with years of wisdom and wear. "You're the one from the news," he said, sitting beside Malik. "You did good, son, but it ain't over." "I know," Malik said, "but every fight's worth it." Malik nodded, his eyes on Jamal. "It's for him," he said, "and all the kids like him." The old man smiled. "Keep fighting, then. We're all in this together." Malik stayed in touch with Detective Reyes, who updated him on the case. Holt's conviction was a network of like-minded individuals, exposed by the investigation, who'd been quietly enabling discrimination in other neighborhoods. It was a sobering reminder of how systemic the problem was. But Malik also saw hope in Aisha's courage, in Jamal's resilience, in the neighbors who'd stepped up. On his next visit, Malik spoke at a local youth center, sharing his story of survival and resistance. The kids listened wide-eyed, asking questions about Delta Force, about the alley, about how to keep going when the world felt against you. "You don't win by hating back," Malik told them. "You win by standing tall and not letting anyone tell you who you are." As he left, a teenager slipped him a folded note. Inside was a drawing of Malik, not as a superhero, but as a man, standing in an alley, his back straight, his eyes fierce. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Thanks for fighting." Malik tucked the note into his pocket, his heart heavy but full. He'd never wanted to be a symbol, but if his story could light a spark, he'd carry that weight. The story of that night in the alley didn't end with an arrest or a conviction. It lived on in every conversation it started, every assumption it challenged. It was a reminder that justice isn't just a verdict, it's a fight, a choice to stand up, again and again. What do you think? Where does justice lie in this story? Share your thoughts on what's right, what's wrong, and how we bridge the divides in our communities.